Welcome to Strategic Fundraising, our workshop here in Naples. I want to thank the Collier County Museums for hosting us today. We are doing this also in person and also by webinar. And for those of you who are on the webinar, you will remain muted, but we have Robin Kilgo who is going to be moderating. So if you have questions or comments as we're moving along through the program, please just type them into the dialog box and she will speak for you. Make sure you get your questions and comments out there. I need to also announce that this is, in addition to being live streamed, it also is being recorded. And we will have this out for the public on our website within the month. Quickly go through the agenda. I'm going to, right after myself, again, I'm Carmen Godwin. I'm the program manager with the FAM Foundation. Melinda Horton's going to talk to us a little bit about FAM and introduce our speakers. And then Turk Lewis with Carter is going to talk about the planning process, and there's some information here about the topics that he will cover. We'll take a short break, and then Brennan Vicio with the South Florida Museum will talk about strategic fundraising. And then we will stop for a Q&A. We are going to try and hold the questions till the end, but if the individual speakers are open to having questions throughout, they will let you know. And then we'll adjourn, and everyone who's here locally hopefully will join us at the member mixer at Naples Botanical Garden. The people who are here on staff with us today are Melinda Horton, who's our executive director, myself, Carmen Godwin, the program manager, and moderating our webinar, Robin Bauer-Kilgo, our special projects manager. Now I'm going to introduce Melinda, who's going to go over a few items about the Florida Association of Museums.
Hi, everybody. I'm Melinda Horton, executive director for the Florida Association of Museums. And luckily, we came in yesterday. We didn't have to swim here, but we did do a lot of driving in rain. I want to also echo Carmen's comments about thanking the Collier County Museum for hosting us today. We also had a local arrangements committee meeting earlier, so that was great. And then tonight, I'm sure most of y'all are going to plan to be at the mixer at the Naples Botanical Garden. And so we're excited to be here in Naples, and we can't wait to be back in September for the conference. As you know, we ended session in May, and then we came back, and now we're back again. And the grants are finalized. We did not get as much funding this year as we did in the previous year. But we have a board meeting, FAM has a board meeting tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about strategies for the future, how we can better advocate all year long, every day, to get the grant funding back up. And that's going to really require educating a lot of legislators, remembering that we have term limits, which means we get a constant new group of people. So you can't just do it once in a while. You've got to do it all the time, every day. So we'll come back to y'all with a report later in a month or two about what we're planning to do. We're going to ask for everybody's help. But in the meantime, you should have gotten an update from me. I think that was last night, about Visit Florida. Visit Florida is one of our partners. We're a partner of Visit Florida. It's very important. It is critical that they receive the funding that they need to operate so that our state is marketed properly. And we are going into special session tomorrow. We'll be in for the next 3 days. A bill has been filed on the House and Senate side, which will restore their funding to full $76 million. There will be new requirements for transparency measures, and we are in full support of what needs to get done to get that funding through. We'll work through some of those issues as we move forward. I serve on the Visit Florida board. I know the board of directors is behind this, and we just want to make sure that it's kept as whole as possible. If they take a funding cut like the level they were expecting, we would have laid off the majority of the staff. So that it has a tremendous impact, not only on our state, but on our institutions, and a trickle down all the way down. So I encourage you to be involved in that process as you get alerts, and we ask you to take action to please do that. And as you know, we're going to be here in September, the 17th through the 20th at the Ritz-Carlton Golf Resort. We have some great sessions planned, wonderful keynote. We're working on some local speakers, and we met, like I said, today with local arrangements. We'll have some fantastic evening events. So be prepared, have your flat shoes on, and be ready to go for 3 days of craziness. So I'm going to move on to introductions, and they're not going to be real long. You guys don't have bios online. Makes it really hard.
I didn't ask for them.
I know. I should have that, but I didn't. It's been a little busy. So I have the pleasure of introducing Brennan Bessio, who is the CEO of South Florida Museum, and she holds a BS and a master's in geology. She's been the CEO of South Florida Museum for the past 10 years, and she also is a member of the FAM board. She serves as an integral member of our board. She's my vice president, which means she'll be my boss soon, or my other boss, my 30-something bosses. And she's just a pleasure to work with. She brings such a great perspective to the group, and she's been so involved since she became director. It's just a pleasure to have her serve with us. And I'm also going to introduce Turk Lewis, who's the managing director at Carter. He did graduate work at Columbia University. He's led advancement teams for 15 years. He helps partners navigate and prioritize immediate and foundational strategies that lead to long-term institutional success. And I think my favorite thing about reading about him was that his focus and passion is engaging in strategic planning and designing actionable development plans for nonprofit institutions. And Lord knows we all need that help. So I'm just thrilled that you're both here, that you're willing to do this, and I look forward to what you have to say, and I welcome you up to present. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Melinda, and thank you very much for having us. Certainly a pleasure to be here. My name is Turk Lewis. I work with Carter. We do work with all kinds of different nonprofits around the world, and I was really pleased to be invited to speak on this topic, something that I really love to talk about with Brennan today. So thank you for being here. I wanted to start by saying we're a small group, and we're actually can see one another, and for those people online, feel part of the group as well. But we really would love to have this be an interactive discussion. I certainly know that in every session that I participate in, there's a lot that I learned from all the people here. So I'd like to look at this as an interactive conversation around the topic of planning and success, particularly as it relates to fundraising. So I thought that I would start just by trying to get a sense about the size of your development advancement programs. So how many of you work in an office with greater than 15 people in advancement? 0 for the record. Okay. How about 10 to 15?
It's too big.
5 to 10. We're getting there. 5 to 10. And 5 or less. That's everybody else. So we're talking about smaller shops, right? And one of the things and I spent a lot of time working in a small advancement shop in 3 different independent schools. One of those offices actually became quite a bit larger because we were able to express what that need looked like and to get that partnership with our board to grow it and to sort of try to implement some new things. But the one thing that I can definitely understand about smaller advancement shops is that it's all hands on deck work. Everyone has to be involved. Communication needs to be excellent. And no one is really allowed to say, not my job, right? Or at least you're not supposed to, because there's just too much to do. And we're going to talk about the ways that planning can help you, particularly in a small environment. So I hope that by the end of this session, there's a lot that you can take with you. I'm going to begin by trying to talk a little bit about planning as an idea, more on the theoretical side, and hear back from you about that as well. And Brennan is going to drill into some practical applications and things that you can take away with you with regard to the impact of planning on fundraising specific. And if at any time you do have a question, please feel free to stop. If we know that we're already going to be addressing it, I may ask you to just hold off, but otherwise, those questions may be helpful in driving our discussion. So I'll just start. That's us. That's more of us. So just in terms of theory, right? Let's just have a conversation. What is a plan? And what does that mean to you when someone says, okay, we're going to have to plan? What is a plan in your view? Someone's got to start me off. Yes.
Well, without a plan, you don't have direction. So a plan really gives you direction. It has to be flexible because things happen and priorities change, but you need a basic with a goal and how you're going to get to that goal.
Great. Okay, so it provides you with direction. It needs to be flexible. and it's something that you can try to develop. Any other thoughts about what planning is? Yes.
It's what you're striving, where you're striving to go. So it's a mission, a vision, it's goals, it's objectives, it's tactics, and it's sort of, you start big picture and then you kind of boil it down and look at how you're going to get there. And I think that's where the flexibility comes in. I think you're planning and you think, oh, we're going to do this, this, and this. And you have to be agile and flexible enough to say, wait a minute, this isn't working the way we thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
Let's shift gears.
Yeah, so getting at a desired outcome, and you suggest a lot of things in there that we'll get into detail on when we talk about strategic planning, but that's really helpful. So a plan by definition, and this is the most boiled down way that I could think to express it, but it's any thoughtful exercise aimed at achieving a desired result. And I want you to think about that definition a little bit as it relates to the discussion, because we'll keep coming back to that and kind of adding on to it and growing it. But those sort of key things, it needs to be thoughtful, it needs to be intentional, right? An exercise doesn't just happen. And it needs to be directed at a result. So what kinds of plans exist? Who can name some? Because I know you all are involved in creating plans all the time in your offices. So you can,
Strategic plans, business plans, marketing plans.
Right, great. So lots of different types of plans. So in terms of, sometimes people talk about having broad plans, broad planning. You familiar with that? Do people ever talk about broad plan as a subcategory? Broad plans are things like, I plan to revisit our staffing structure this summer. Or there's a plan to figure out how to increase visitation at the museum, right? So when you think about the definition we were looking at for planning, is that even a plan? They're not. Those are fake plans. I'm trying to catch you. But the whole idea of broad planning, planning can be broad, and we'll get to sort of the big piece of strategic planning. They must be broad because they have to include a lot of different factors. But when people talk about a broad plan, or they have a plan that doesn't have a directed outcome, it's not a plan at all. So I thought I would start there with what it's not. Okay, so we talked about different types of plans, right? Project-based plans, you might call them. But these are all different examples, and there are many more. So I wanted to think of those different types of plans that you have, and to get a sense of the plans that you have, the plans that you're working with currently, right? Because we'd like for you to be able to take some of this conversation and take it with you so it's actionable in your organization. Let's start with a question. When you think about a plan that you have, why is the plan created in the first place? Yes?
I think it's really important to first meet with everybody that's involved, but then you share that plan with everybody that's involved so that you're sort of on track, and this is why we're doing what we're doing.
That's a great point.
Accountability is part of it as well.
Sure. But I'm just thinking about if you reflect on the last plan that was created in your office, right? And that has people snickering already. How did that come about? Maybe I'm begging the question. Was it your idea? Was it someone else's idea? Did you believe in the idea? Sorry.
Because you want to make a change. You want to facilitate change.
Because you want to facilitate, that's a great reason to create a plan, to facilitate change, right? So that's intentional. It's aimed at an outcome. Probably have to define that outcome, but that's important. I think what I'm trying to get at here is, it is important to start with, wait, why are we doing this? Right? When you think about planning and the intentionality of it, make sure that you understand why, okay? Next question goes, how, in your response to how they get created, the importance of engaging everyone in that process. But we all know that there are going to be limitations to that at times, right? Sometimes ultimately you really want to, but can you get audience with your board chair tomorrow? Not always. Can you get audience with the entire board at all? Sometimes that's difficult. And we're going to talk a little bit about the role of staff in planning and that planning process. But how those plans get created, that's very important as well. Who's involved, right? And at what level are people involved? And then how are those plans implemented, okay? So implementation is really critical to looking at the effectiveness of a plan. A lot of times people are concentrated on the plan itself, and that's the outcome. But there's a lot more to having effective planning, right, than just that document. Oftentimes that's not the most important part. And then how are these plans reviewed? Do they sit on a shelf, or is there a process in place for reviewing how well your plans matched the outcomes that you were projecting? So strategic plans. We all talk about strategic plans. They are institutional, they're overarching, they need to be long-term, they should be mission-driven. They need to be active, meaning that, again, it's the process has as much to do with the efficacy of a strategic plan as the document itself. But good strategic plans really provide the foundation for fundraising. If you don't have clarity around what you're doing, why you're doing, and how you're doing it, it's very difficult to have an effective fundraising program. Okay, so strategic. Someone talk about what that means to them. What does it mean to be strategic? And how important is the term strategic to the term strategic plan? Because we all know what one is, right? But do you think about what that strategic piece is? Very important. So what can we say about it? Who can offer some opinion about what we mean when we talk about being strategic?
Everything you do has a purpose.
Very important, right? So there's a purpose, okay? And that's also what we talked about in the initial idea of planning, right? That it has to have a purpose. Yes?
Well, I think after you get the lay of the land and you sort of take everything in, you're deciding on the best path for your organization. So you're going to look at data, you're going to analyze it, you're going to have it inform your decisions so that you're not taking a shot in the dark. You've got a reason why you've chosen that path, and it's what you believe to be the optimal path based on what you've taken a look at.
So a couple things that you said there that I was sharing. One is that you need to have information, you need to have some expertise, otherwise you really don't know what you're building, right? It has to come from a place of being informed. And also there has to be sort of a process and a plan to go forward. So when we talk about strategic, relating to the identification of long-term or overall aims and interests and the means of achieving them. So I think a lot of times, we get this, understand that this is important, but it's easy to miss some of the elements in truly being strategic in the planning process. So let's just look back at these different types of plans that we talked about, right? These project-based plans. And think about this definition of strategy. So is it possible, for example, to have a good collection management plan if you don't meet all these criteria of strategy? If you're not thinking long-term, if you're not looking at the overall aims and interests of the institution, and if you don't have a clear idea of how you're going to get there, what are the means of achieving them, right? So with a collection management plan, does that necessarily have to be strategic?
When you say collection management, do you mean getting the money from pledges?
Oh, no, I mean in terms of a collection in the museum.
Oh,
But you could apply it to that too. I mean, so if it's pledge collection plan, right? Can you have a pledge collection plan that just says, well, go out and get it? Well, if you have no one to do it, if you don't know what the means are of achieving it, then that plan doesn't really work, right? But you've seen these plans where they don't work. And I think what I'm getting at is they don't work because they lack strategy. You must look at the long-term goal make sure that it fits with the mission of your institution, ensure that you have the means necessary to achieve it, or it's not a plan. So for me, I know we talk about strategic plans in our work all the time, and that's a term referring to these big, broad, institutional long-term plans and the process to getting there. But I would say that, in fact, every plan has to require strategy. So when you're talking about planning, I think the first thought needs to be tying planning to strategy. Otherwise, it's not really a plan, because you don't have focus on what that overall goal is. You don't have clarity around how you're going to get there, right? And you probably don't have it necessarily tied to your mission. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is the notion, considering strategic planning, and that being very important to an organization. But if you boil this down and recognize that the elements of strategic planning need to exist in any kind of plan. You can't make your own personal career plan without having a thoughtful idea of what the means are to getting there. Right? I mean, I'd love to be a pro hockey player. There's no way that's happening. I mean, when I was 14, I thought there was. But then I got more information. I got more expertise. I had more people at the table who said, Turk, there's no way. So it never happened. All right, so are there questions at this stage? Are there things that we're talking about, or I'm talking about, I'd really love to pass the mic to all of you, that don't really seem to fit or that we want to probe again? I mean, do you generally agree with this notion that a plan really isn't a plan unless you have strategy? Right? Violent assent. Okay. So let's talk about what makes a good plan, okay? And all of these elements are what we talked about originally in the original definition of planning, right? And the first thing being thoughtful, and I recognize that this stuff seems really simple and you're sitting here thinking, why is this guy even saying this to me, right? I know all this. Test yourself slightly. If you come back to the next planning exercise that you do and just consider a few of these points, you may find it a much more constructive exercise. And I know Brennan will have a lot more to share with you that's more specific, detailed, and directly related to the fundraising piece. But just on the theoretical side, it actually shifts into practical. If, when you first sit down to talk about planning, you consider things like, okay, well, why are we doing this, right? How is this going to positively impact the organization? Is there a clearly defined and clearly accepted and agreed upon outcome? And then lastly, I'd say you really have to have some way of measuring that. And in my experience, the bigger plans that end up as good ideas and sometimes helpful, but don't produce positive outcomes, are because they're not measurable. You've got to find a vehicle for measuring those, measuring their success, and you have to have a process by which you're going to regularly go back and look at them and measure whether or not you are successful or you aren't, right? Because planning is really a process. It's not about someone coming up with a great idea and it being over. It needs to have a life. It needs to continue. It needs to become an organism that's a part of your organization that supports it. So a couple things about good planning. First, be thoughtful. And what that means is taking the risk of asking the question why. Actually know that you're thinking about what you're talking about rather than just doing it because you've been told to do it. Another thing that's very important is having the expertise. And we mentioned that earlier. So sometimes, and that also relates to who's involved, right? It's important to make sure that you have these blind spots covered. I mean, I've been involved in master planning work that came out of strategic plans, and it all seemed very thoughtfully organized, right? Well, we raised $10 million, built a fantastic auditorium, and had nowhere to park people. I mean, that's bad planning. It was thoughtful execution. We raised the money. We got what we needed. That need was connected to the mission of the organization, but we were missing the expertise. We were missing someone who was sitting there to say, wait, you know, I do this kind of urban planning work. You've got a parking problem, solve that before you build it. So it's important to think about the composition of the people at the table to ensure that you have the expertise to be able to make these plans broad enough and long-term, right? Because it might have worked for a little while, but you want to make sure that it works for long-term. Understanding your mission. And again, this is an obvious point, but I think every organization has a different way of ensuring that they are or are not connected to their mission. But that should be a real focal point that will help you in terms of ensuring that your planning goes well. Because look, one thing about planning, it does involve more than one person, which means it involves multiple opinions, multiple ideas. The one guiding principle should always be the mission of your organization. That helps you to keep clarity and stay focused. There's the focus part. So the clarity of focus, that's about sort of the pre-planning work, making sure that everyone understands and agrees upon, all right, what's our objective, where are we trying to get, so that you don't have multiple competing interests, because that just becomes frustrating, right? People start to lose focus and lose attention. Developing consensus. Ultimately, you know, you have to be able to make sure that you get to a point where everyone agrees. This is where we want to go. This is what we believe in. This supports the mission of our institution. We're in this together. Implementing methodology that's appropriate, and this is something that we spoke to earlier. So it's important to know how you're going to do it. It's important to have clearly established boundaries and guidelines. And it's
an example.
Yeah, of methodology.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in the example, so if you take a strategic plan, for example, you could have clarity of focus. You could have the right people engaged. You could have a process, but if it lacks appropriate methodology, like ensuring that you're communicating with all of your constituencies, which is sometimes very difficult to do. Or if you don't have methodology, that includes review of that plan and has appropriate ability to be flexible or to shift it over time. I think those are the types of things. Creating a shared commitment, obviously that's part of that consensus piece. And the last thing that I talked about a lot, only because that's been my greatest frustration in going through some pretty good strategic planning processes, they get left. And I get it, and I understand why. And I think the main reason for my organizations where that happened was because there's no time. And so when you're really limited in terms of the man hours that you have, what takes precedence? Things that are time sensitive. So events take precedence. Your communications deadlines take precedence because they have to happen, right? And so the planning piece, which I'm arguing here, is among the most important pieces to having a successful fundraising organization. It gets pushed aside because unless you impose those deadlines on yourselves, they won't happen. And rushed planning is the worst kind of planning, where you don't have the opportunity to truly be thoughtful, to get the right people engaged, to consider the broad outcomes on your institution, right? Because you miss one of those pieces and all of a sudden it falls apart. And when I miss stuff, it's usually because I'm rushed. So while it's challenging at times, you know, in terms of managing staff hours, to take the time to do planning, I would argue it's one of the most important things that you can do, because you'll work more efficiently, you'll work more productively, you'll work more as a team in terms of gaining consensus around what you want to do. And hopefully you'll also have that support from your board and from others because of using a process that's thoughtful.
Sure. So I didn't know him before an hour and a half ago.
We're very good friends now.
We tried to meet, but couldn't meet before this conference. I've worked with Carter companies for years with our board of directors. We've really benefited from their help, a third-party objective, in helping our board move through. Sometimes, you know, I always said I want to grow up. When I grow up, I want to be a consultant because then maybe somebody will listen to me. But it is true.
Not all.
It is true that it helps to have a third-party objective, and I think other people in the room here would validate that if you're in a director role, because it gives some validation to what you're doing. So I've appreciated Turk being here today, and some of you have met Steve Higgins, who I've been working with, and he has helped present with me. But it helps, and Carter's still working with us on a retainer basis in helping us with our governance, our fundraising, because we still have another 15 million to raise. We've raised 12 million, but it's ongoing. It's integrating everything, and they've been great for that. So that's my plug for you.
Well, thank you very much.
And thank you for laying the groundwork. Now this is where the reality comes in, and I think the Turk really laid it out nice in the fact that there is no time, right? I mean, that's part of the issues we all face is the fact that there's no time.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna just try to share with you how I feel about, or how I've applied it. I've been talking about the South Florida Museum and Bishop Planetarium for almost 10 years in workshops here, and I think you guys have seen an evolution. I came into this board with 58 people on the board of directors. Now we're down to 20. And we had no term limits, so now we have term limits. We're finally terming people off. It's been a process, right? When I started, I was handed their first strategic plan, and they said, "It's yours to implement." Not partnership, it's yours to implement. And I will share with you how that we've come a long ways from that kind of a mentality. So aspects of everything in your organization leads to fundraising, right? So it's your board of directors, it's all of your staff. Is it your custodial staff? Absolutely. What's more important than a clean bathroom? Your donors and members are fundraisers. Your programs are fundraisers. So people come to your programs and they experience it, or they come to your museum. So every piece of your facility is really a part of your strategic direction, and so that's why you need a strategic plan. So I will say, I will validate that I vote with Turk in saying that, you know, this strategic plan is critical, and it makes my job easier. It makes the board's job easier to have a written plan as well. So I think that as we talked about, as was talked about earlier, it's building your team. The value is in the process, right? The coming together to talk about strategic direction. And this is really an engagement. And it's not the board directing us. It's the board depending on our expertise as staff. And we're using their expertise and their skills and coming together to build the best plan and direction we can for the organization. So it also encourages future thinking. One of the things that I've really learned in this last iteration of our strategic plan is that it is hard for people to think strategically. It's hard to think about the future. It's hard to project 5 years, 10 years. What do we really want to be? And then back out from that and look at what needs to happen to get there. And so you have to give board members practice in doing that. It doesn't happen overnight. You've got board members are the best people in your community that have come together to help you, but they don't necessarily have that skill in strategic thinking. And so to help that process, that's where a consultant or another person from another organization can come in and kind of be an objective third party and getting people to think about what is strategic here.
I would add to that, Brand, just, you know, I've had people when I was a development director who worked at other organizations that were a little bit more established, and even them just having a presence in terms of creating that process and methodology. That was really important because somehow when you're all together, trustees and staff, some of that breaks down. And partially because, you know, you have your certain rhythm and everyone's, you know, but you need that structure. It's really helpful.
It is helpful. It also sets the tone for the budget. You know, you can't build your budget without a plan. You know, you can build a budget, but what are you trying to achieve by the end of the year or by the end of 5 years? What's your budget in 5 years? You know, we just got finished our favorite grant process, right? And you have to project not only a year out, but then if you're with the cultural facilities grant, we put in one this year, we had to project 5 years out. It's like, oh my gosh, so it's good we have a strategic plan to think about doing that. So it helps not only what do you need, but then how are you going to get it? So, and the board is part of that process in helping you figure out how you're going to get it, right? So the goals help direct the board and staff work. It kind of gives you a common ground to talk from, that common language. And it also is something that then you have a piece, you have a document or whatever that you can share that with donors, because people love it. They want to see the fact that you have been responsible enough to have developed a plan. And so I'm always proud to, give our plan out, and that makes people feel good that these people know what they're doing, because I want to invest my money in a place that knows what they're doing. So how do you create this plan? Well, I'm a real proponent of board and staff coming together. It can be either internally or externally facilitated. I've been part of both methods. I don't think there's a right or wrong. It's whatever works for your organization. If you've got somebody internally that can do it, then that saves you money. Sometimes a director from another organization could come in and help you, and you could trade off. I mean, there's ways of doing that to help with that process. I like getting the external input from your constituencies, so focus groups or surveys. How do you know what your community needs unless you take that time to go outside of your organization and find out who you're serving, what they're talking about? And also research about competitors. I like that aspect of it. And, it can be as simple or as complex as your organization needs and wants. It just needs to be thorough and not completed in isolation. The other thing, looking at trends in museums, so getting that, the AAM's future museums, looking at what are museums doing, where are they going, where is education taking us, what is our school district doing, how are we meeting their needs? It's looking at all of that as you think about how important we are as informal learning institutions and how we become that vital partner that works with all of these, all your partners in the community. So getting feedback from all of them is really important. So I've got 2 slides here of our goals, and I'm happy to send our strategic plan out to anybody. And I'm sorry, moving back and forth. I had eye surgery about a month ago, and I'm not seeing well, so I'm trying. Turk was right. The font was too small for him. So anyway, I wanted to show you that that we have a goal on everything. So our first goal is about the collection, inventory and activate the collection. We have 60,000 pieces. Oh my gosh, it's a lot of stuff, right? And it's been a labor of love, and we're getting there. We're doing our NAGPRA compliance, and we're trying to get it all in order for eventual expansion and also knowing what we have to get rid of. But we needed a goal to address that. We really hadn't had that before in a plan. We have a goal of strengthening our brand through strategic communications. And I'm happy to tell you that we have a new name, and we have a new brand elements coming. It is going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. So lovely to have a goal on this. And I'm just so excited about it because it's gonna help put us on the map. We've 70 years with a name that everybody thinks we're in Miami. So I'm excited. But we needed a goal on it because we're putting a lot of resources into that. So we put a goal on that. Goal 3, ensure visitors want to come to the museum, feel welcomed and engaged while at the museum, and leave eager to return again. So that's a vision for us, that we want people to come and we want them to come back. We want them to come back and ask questions and be part of it. So that relates all to the education, to everything, to the experiences that we provide, whether it's the website, whether it's their first in the door, their work interaction with the staff, that kind of thing, or volunteers. The 4th is become the region's leading resource and preferred partner in natural history and science education. So clearly related to a natural history museum's goal. Goal 5, this is one of my favorites. This is for the board and staff partnership together. Grow institutional capacity and sustainable financial resources to support the delivery of mission and achieve the vision. So that was developed as a goal together, board and staff, within that component. And I'm going to pull out some of those there are joint responsibilities, and I love having that. It isn't all on staff. I have a development officer that is also over communications, myself, and a development associate. We've staffed up a little bit for the campaign, on and off here, but that's it on development staff. I need the partnership of the board, and I'm glad to have that written into the document that we have. The next goal is that we're expanding, so we have a goal on the campus expansion, and then goal 7 is for the board themselves. Attract and retain a full and active board of directors who embrace the responsibilities and are emotionally connected and financially committed to the museum's mission and vision. You need that platform of strength in your board. And that is one of the biggest things I've learned in being the museum director, is how important that board of directors is and having the right people there. So the impact of board work is it organizes and focuses them. You can take a strategic planning document and you can align the board committees. They can look at this document and think, well, we've got to have a committee in marketing. We've got to have a committee on the master campus plan. We've got to have a committee in finances, usually a standing committee. Maybe we need an education or outreach committee, whatever it is, whatever's in your plan, they can then align their work to that, which I think is important. And then the governance, what you've touched on all this allows other plans to be developed. What is the governance plan? Where are you going to go with facility improvements or programming? And then they can relate to the annual budget that I present. So maybe I'm working with finance committee or with development committee in building this budget with the staff. But because of the plan, it supports everything that I'm trying to present. Wow, look at that staffing budget. Well, I need those resources to be able to implement this plan. So we got to figure out how to get those resources. So that's how it can help with the board work. I think some of the biggest thing, though, on board is that they've got to figure out who oversees it. So unlike my first day on the job 10 years ago, here, Brianne, how are you going to implement this plan? It's how are we going to come together as a board and staff? How is the board going to do it? And on our end, our board has decided that it's their executive board that's going to, which is leadership, your officers plus the chairs of committees are going to oversee the plan. So for all of you, for anybody, who oversees a strategic plan that you have in your organization? Maria?
Well, like you, Brennan, our executive committee is the liaison to the plan and has one meeting a year that's designated solely to dive deep into the review of the plan and the year-long, the 5-year metrics.
So the executive board. How about any other museum folks? Russ?
Right now, it's me,
Just you?
but that hopefully.
As he looks at me.
Sounds like a good plan.
No, it just reinforces exactly, if you don't have the board and your partnership, it makes it very difficult.
One plan ago, we had a strategic planning committee that was overseeing the strategic plan for the board, and staff were on that committee. So this committee, they wanted to evaluate the plan. Well, I didn't like the fact that staff would be evaluating board work because I didn't want to put them in that position. Because if the board weren't coming through, I don't like that kind of, I try to shelter the staff from, board or not participating. But it also didn't involve the chairs. So the chairs that were actually there, supposed to be implementing the work, they weren't evaluating their own work or the work of each other. So I think the executive board can be, or some sort of steering committee that's composed of the chairs of the committees can be a useful thing. I don't know what you think, Kirsten.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and to your point, I think that you need to have this shared ownership, but it can't be imposed, and it certainly can't be imposed from staff onto the board. So you've got to find that champion and authorize him or her to have that leadership role, because guess what? When you need other support from the board, that's who you need to lean on and say, hey, Charlie, we really don't have enough engagement right now. So that's essential.
Any other thoughts or questions? So here's an example of impact of board work and governance. As I go back to my other comment, strong board is critical. Critical to your success as a development staff, as any staff member, or as the director. So, the strategic plan helps them define what relationships we need in the community to move the plan forward. So if you have a whole plan that revolves around partnerships with school districts in your different counties, then can you get somebody from the school district on your board or on an advisory board? It helps them think about the people that they need. It also defines their role so that they can create a position description that's meaningful. I came into the museum, they didn't have a position description. So it's helpful for board members coming in as you're recruiting people for them to know what they are supposed to do, and they hand them the plan and they go, wow, these people know what they're doing. I know where we're going, and so it all kind of fits together. And then it helps them figure out the criteria. So you can do a board matrix, you can figure out where you want people from and all of that, but you also have to look at where are you going and what do you need from people in the community and money to move forward, and that's what your plan can help, because you visioned in 5 years we want to be a regional hub of learning in natural history or whatever your deal is. In order to get there, we're going to build new buildings, build new exhibits, and so we need money. We need connections to educators, to connections to money, yes. We need people not afraid to ask for money. We need people not afraid to share how much they love your mission, that they want to bring people here. And then this governance, of course, this influences the succession plan. Who's the right leadership at the time to put their money where their mouth is? And I'm so-and-so with a business, and I'm going to go to my friends downtown. Downtown needs this museum. And I want you to join me in participating and supporting this museum. You need people like that. You need great, all different kinds of leaders, but you need leadership to help you as staff members. Any questions on that? I'm just a big proponent of governance. So here's the strategic plan board goal. So it was attract a full and active board of trustees, right? So on this, they put this down together. This is what they're going to do. They're going to identify, cultivate, and nominate candidates that are from their criteria. So they put this in. This is their accountability. They're going to act as the strategic governing body, focusing on 3 areas: fundraising, policy making, and community ambassadors. That's what we want our board to be, right? So it's right in their strategic plan. And they need to, they're going to review and revise their meeting structure. So they wanted to do this. They wanted to make sure they're having effective meetings. And then they wanted to uphold the board member expectation policy and do annual board reviews and whether it's individual assessments and board work of themselves. So having that in the strategic plan is a gift, because now they look at it and they say, okay, this is our map. We know we need to be getting there and use this. So I just pull that out for them. And we talked about the budget. It has to reflect your goals, the current. And, the great thing about having a strategic plan is that you can predict your cycle of revenues and expenses depending upon what you're doing. So you have to have the plan in order to get there. Now, staff work. I'm a proponent of staff knowing why. And I still have a member of my staff that doesn't believe in that. I just can't get it across to him. I mean, the custodians need to know why you're doing it. Why are you keeping and maintaining a beautifully clean facility for people to come in and learn from? Everybody needs to know why, and I think that the staff sharing in the development of the strategic plan helps build that why. It also allows you to build more interdepartmental work. I mean, how many of us, are there any silos in any of the museums or organizations that we have? Do we have silos?
Muffled laughter.
Muffled laughter. I mean, we do. And what we're trying to do now with this strategic plan is build more interdepartmental work teams. And that we hope will give us even better success at what we're doing. And it's laid out in the strategic plan because the staff put it in there. Our senior staff put it in there. And then staff can build their annual goals around this, their work goals, so that their supervisors that can review that and measure them. And then it gives me, as a CEO, I can go back to the board and say, look at everything that everybody's doing, and we can achieve this, but we don't have the resources to achieve this. The budget couldn't reflect this. So it gives you a roadmap. And then, how as we go along on our path, there's always something that comes up that you want that somebody says, I think we should be joining with the community and doing so. Let's participate in this other fundraiser event or this program event, but we should be tabling at all farmers markets all year and talking about the museum. And we don't have enough staff to do that stuff. Or we can look at all the other stuff that isn't in the priorities. Or if something says, well, that fits with this category. So it gives you that measure, and that's what I like about the plan. Everybody, it's all laid out in black and white. So fundraising, there's fundraising in the plan. Well, talked about fundraising needs a plan. Everything needs a plan. Everything needs to be strategic. Annual fund, endowment. I have a brand new board member who will be the next chair, and he's awesome. And his first question of two other board members, and I love my board, I love everybody. It's been a grassroots board, it's been a great board. But his first question when he came in was, what's the goal for the endowment? What an amazing question that is. What's the goal for the endowment? There is one. We have a $15 million endowment as an organization because some of the founders established it. But the board has never set a goal really to increase it. We started with Carter to do it as our part of our campaign, and we didn't do a lot at the beginning, but we put money into it. We have put money. We put almost $500,000 in, but we want to do more. And so, what a great question from a board member. Isn't that fabulous? I just almost kissed him. It's like, yes. I guess somebody who understands. I love that. There's got to be strategy and goals for all of this. So, so the annual fund, what's your cycle? What's the community doing? What do you want to participate in the community? For us, we've got Snooty the manatee, right? Everybody loves manatees. Snooty's birthday is in the summer. It's the perfect time for us to do a big fundraising campaign for the General Museum. We started it out as just a manatee campaign, but to focus on what the community loves and do fundraising around that for the museum. And that's our big campaign, public campaign. So, what's your cycle? Is it the giving challenge that somebody's or Giving Tuesdays, or is it, which I am not, I appreciate the funding, but I'm not a fan of them driving us like that. But what works in your community and what works for your museum? So you have to establish what that cycle is. And then everybody, would, of course, wants an endowment. And then planned giving needs to be in there. You can be subtle. We don't have a very robust planned giving program, but we're working on it. Everything's a work in progress, right? We're working on it. We're gaining on it.
I would say that planned giving piece kind of gets back to the point that I was making earlier about planning, which is it doesn't have to get done right now. It just kind of doesn't get done in a small shop.
Exactly.
And it's no irony that it's called planned giving. That's not exactly what it's related to. But if you don't plan to do it, you will not develop a planned giving program because it's all about way in the future. You may not even be in that seat in 10 years, right? But if you don't start doing something with it now, you're not going to see a robust endowment grow. It's challenging.
You are exactly right. Exactly right. So it's on our list.
I got it.
So Kathy Fleming, who's the president of FAM now, I have a favorite quote from her, is that it's on the list, it's just not next.
Right.
So with the limited time we all have, we have to figure out what's next. And really, that's what it's all about. Any questions on this particular aspect?
So when you were out asking for a major gift, you don't talk about planned giving. Or
I do. So let me continue. I think that's a really good question. because really this is a menu of options, right? Okay. So let me go to our fundraising plan and I'll address your question. So what does a fundraising plan look like? Is it detailed? Is it simple? It can have any form you want. I have had, in all these years, I've had many different types of, we've had different types of fundraising plans and different kinds of consultants. Everybody has a different opinion, and you go to this workshop and you do it this way. You have to do what works for you. So this is our fundraising goal. And the goal was to grow institutional capacity, right? So that, and we could have, so we'd have sustainable financial resources. And we are expanding. It turns out we're a little behind just when we're starting, but we're going to open a new wing of the museum. It looks like in February of 2019, with a new early learning center, classrooms, and new rental spaces. So the goal was to create a business plan for the revenue streams that will come from that, which, you know, I intended to do last week for the cultural facilities grant. So it's all done. But we also want to continue to grow membership. We want to have a look at grant opportunities. How are we going to get revenue streams that will support each phase of the construction? We also want to leverage our momentum for the first campaign to jump us into the next campaign. That's the next one. And then the next one is to expand our network of large businesses as SFM partners and prospects. So we haven't done much with businesses. We haven't had a lot of business people that go to businesses. I mean, we have corporate partners and, you know, the usual banks with their marketing money and that kind of stuff. But I finally have some small business people who are willing to go to other people and say, hey, join me in supporting this organization. So our goal is to really support the businesses. But ultimately, what we're really trying to do is build our individuals in our plan, and that's not as inherent in this goal, but that's what ours looks like right now. It's in constant review, and I'll say that about a strategic plan. A rolling strategic plan is a good idea, so that you can reassess, because things change. You get a delay in construction, you get a delay in this, partnerships change, funding changes, so you have to be able to be able to go with the flow and change your plan. So we have an overview, and I'm happy to send this to everybody. This is just our philosophy. We give this to our resource committee. So we've had a funding committee, we've had a development committee, we've had now a resource committee. 3 different names in 10 years. And I kind of like resource committee because resources are important. And I chose that name. No, I didn't ask. But sometimes you just got to do, right? So the philosophy, our development officer, Martha Wells, put this together. Our philosophy of fundraising is, which is important in knowing the planning, is to develop, focus on relationships and connecting people to the museum. That's it. That's it. That is our philosophy.
And I would argue that that's really, really important. Because it's important for 2 reasons. One, it's very simple, right? No one can misunderstand that, and it's really intentional. And so people know that that's where they're starting when they're going out there, or they're thinking about a plan for making a major gift solicitation. You know, they know it's about that personal connection. So that's like having a mission for your own fundraising program.
When you're standing in line at Publix, you know how we all talk, you know, you're wearing a badge, you're wearing a shirt, you're talking about, you want your board members doing the same thing. Right? So they're always advocating. We're always building relationships, connecting people. So for us, donor retention is a priority. The donor acquisition is an ongoing process through relationship building. It could take 10 years to get a gift. It might be the best gift you ever got. To that end, we focus on relationships with our donors, members, program participants, and prospective supporters. And areas in which we raise money is everything, capital, annual, of course. And the processes by which we raise money is cultivation, working with donors and corporations to connect them robustly and intimately with the museum, and then stewarding our donors. That stewardship, communication with our donors, letting them know what we're doing, I think is critical. You know, that's a piece that, so they feel connected and know what's going on. The other is just, this is how we fundraise. We have a match, Carrie's match for our manatee or middle of the year appeal, summer appeal. We have an end of the year appeal. We participate in the Community Foundation's Giving Challenge. We have corporate partners. We have a gala. So when I came to the museum, we had 4 fundraising events. 4. And as time, we talked about time, they are time sensitive. They take all your time.
Yeah.
Right? If it were up to me, I would not have a gala. I would say no. But it's been in the community. It's the nicest event. It does bring people in. We had about 600 people come to our gala, and you know, it's a signature event. So 25 years of that.
Oh, Snooty Gala?
The Snooty's Gala. So it started when they built the new tank for Snooty, and he always gives a show every time. So it's Snooty's Gala. Huh? No, it's not Snooty and Manatee. He'll be 69 this summer. So we keep it going. His legacy is, of course, our manatee rehab program. But people love that event. And people like to invest in different ways, right? So we have corporate partners or people who want to sponsor that event that like the splash of a big event. And so Bank of America is one of our sponsors for this. But then I have another bank, like Northern Trust, likes the splash of corporate partnership all year long, continued sponsorship and continued recognition. Then I have exhibit sponsors. I got the Pittsburgh Pirates that are supporting our sportsology exhibit. That's a big splash for them. You know, for the 3 months we got the exhibit. So there's something for everybody. You have a menu of options for marketing relationships, which is your sponsorships, and that's all gala is a marketing relationship. You know, if you think about it, unless you get a sponsorship, a ticket, you don't make much money on a ticket, right? Because the catering's so high, the cost of the event, and you rent a band, and you know. Kind of stuff. So it's a lovely event. If anyone else that comes, it's lovely. It's lovely, but I would get rid of it. So anybody else have events? Anybody else? So we cut down. So now we're doing one event. And what we do is, I'll get to you in a second, is we do a museum immersions. We have donors or we have board members or staff. We've gathered small groups of people in. We fly through the universe in our planetarium. We connect them through the natural history ideas in our main museum all the way up and watch to the manatees, and people love it. And I've got donors who bring people back for that. That's mission. They come away with mission. Snooty's Gala, they have fun, they drink too much, they dance, they have a great time. Oh, I love the museum, or I went to a wedding at the museum. But museum immersions work, and they build our donors, is what they do. And I got donors bringing busloads of people back to us. Maria.
Renee, I just, you and I have talked about this many, many times about the events piece, but when I first got to Mosh 8 years ago, that was the first thing I did was kill all the gala events and put that energy and resources into our programming and fundraising planning. And we did have one gala this past year for our 75th anniversary, and afterwards our board decided not to continue that because we are so event driven already that it was just one more event, but the return on it was just not that great. So I guess I'm just supporting that events are not the best fundraising tool. I certainly appreciate that they belong somewhere on the menu if it's appropriate for your organization, but for us, they were not a great tool. So we just made that decision not to go into it.
I think that's a really good point. I would just share that I've had the experience of doing an assessment, right, and looking at an institution and saying, you guys spend so much time on events. This is what it actually brings in. This is what the kind of money that you could bring in if you spent more time on a donor-focused strategy, right? And I was right, and I knew I was right, and I was selling it to trustees, and I was pushing on doors. And you know what? It didn't fit the culture of the institution.
Yeah.
So you have to be really wary of that because you may be as right as you want to be, but if there are people coming with torches and pitchforks, you're out of a job. So you have to be sensitive to what the institution will bear. And so over time we managed to shift things, but I had to learn to take a back seat and to listen really carefully to what the culture of the institution was like, and tread slowly. But I loved hearing what you said because it's an illustration of the fact that you do have a fundraising philosophy. So you didn't throw it out, But you did find other things that were more appropriate to this idea of connecting people within the institution.
It's relationship building. Yes.
We have a question from online.
Okay.
Tell us about your awareness events.
Well, we started them really with our capital campaign, but we have continued them, going back to the menu of options, we've continued them not specifically. So what we do is, if they're just a general museum awareness event, we do, like I said, we have a planetarium. We show them the capabilities of our system and how we provide educational programming. We can customize programming. So we literally fly them through the universe and then fly them back. And then we have the Natural History Museum. We do tours, and we talk about what we talk about, how we connect ideas within the museum for people, because it's really all about connection, right? So people walk in and they see a museum and they might read a panel. They walk into our museum, they see a mastodon. So does anybody know what family manatees are related to? Elephants. So you wouldn't normally come in and connect the mastodon to the manatees. So that's what we do with our awareness events, is we bring in connections like that to people with our educators, that they can, that people leave and they take away, wow, this is what I learned. This is what the museum's doing. Did you know that manatees are related to elephants? They all lose their teeth. They get marching molars. Elephants have marching molars. Manatees have marching molars. Elephants they get about 6 sets of teeth. Isn't that amazing? So people walking away with that awe, or eye-opening, right? So that's what an awareness event is. It's awareness of what we're teaching. Years ago, when I started this capital campaign, I had a longtime member in the community say to me, Bernann, I know where you are, I know what you are, I don't know what you do. And I would say that about every institution. People don't know the depths of what you're doing in your collaborations in the community, in your partnerships, in that general visitor coming in. They don't know what you do, and we don't measure our work, right? So that's difficult to capture the value of our education. But when people experience it, then they know better. And that's been the value in our awareness events. So you can tailor them to anything specific in your museum topics. It could be about the campaign. So we show them our plans, talk about where we're going. And that's part of the awareness. We make those soft asks. We need investors. And if you know somebody that needs this tour, let me know and we'll bring them back. All your clubs, we invite every club to come in, use our boardroom for free. Robin's been in our boardroom, we have a view right into the manatee tank. Come, use our boardroom, and we'll give you free tickets. Come see what we're doing. Hopefully let us give a little tour. That's awareness events at any different levels. Could be a club, could be a specific donor-related thing. Sometimes we get banks to sponsor them. We usually cater them. So we have we always provide wine and beer. It's always nice to have that option.
We actually have another question.
Okay.
It says, if you have a board that is not experienced or engaged in fundraising, what is the best way to encourage more education in this area if you are a staff person?
Great question.
Say after 10 years. I think you never, and I'll let Turk can certainly answer it from your experience too. I think as staff, you just have to keep after it. You can never give up. You just have to, you always share the victories. Every board meeting, or let me tell you about this donor that came in and brought his friends, and now they're both, now he's a member, and just keep talking about the successes and how much people, and really, I think board members are afraid of asking for money. And it isn't about asking for money. It's about getting people to love you so much that they say, how can I help? And that happens. It happens all the time. How can I help? It could be just a $25 gift that could be very meaningful, or it could be a $5 million gift. So do you want to?
I think the question paraphrased is, if you have board members who aren't really engaged, how do you go about engaging them as a staff person? I would say the first thing, and I'm reflecting on, again, as I shared before, experiences where I did this the wrong way, and then figure out how to do it maybe the better way. you have to take time to assess that landscape. So it makes a lot of sense to take the time to sit down with and develop some form of relationship with every trustee. And you have to develop the emotional empathy to be able to understand how to read who's a potential champion and who you're really not going to be able to turn around. And that's the planning piece that's really helpful, because if you don't, then you spend an inordinate amount of time, because some people require an inordinate amount of your time, and you need to give it to them because they're your trustees. But after that, if you can get them to go with you even to another organization's awareness event, if you can get them to go with you to a professional development session. I mean, I was in a small independent school where they didn't ask anybody for money. When I came in and I said, no, this doesn't work, they almost ran me out of town. So I had to figure out who I could take with me. And I took my head of school and the president of the board to 2 institutional fundraising conferences so they could understand the language and hear the same things that I was saying from institutional professionals.
I think it's just that exposure and being positive and introducing them to other boards. We've had our board meet with other boards, and that can be helpful where they can share experiences. I think when they start seeing positives, our board are now doing teams. They have a team leader. They have teams. They're gonna charge through this, and that's what their decision isn't mine. But they want to do it. Let's talk about team. That'll help them build their teamwork. So, let me show you this detailed development plan. I'm not going to even read it to you. This is years ago that I took our whole community was involved. The Community Foundation paid for a consultant and hours and hours of time on a board member's part and my part in building this plan. And the board looked at it. It was like multi-page. And yikes is the right word. Nobody's going to do something like this, right? So we've had various plans over the years. And if you go back to that, so you can do this. I don't recommend it, and I don't think it works. What we're doing now is you're going back to that donor philosophy of a donor, new and old. So we're all about connecting to new or working with our current connections of people. And we want to build our circle of museum friends and retain them. And how do we do this? Well, it's all about getting people to the museum, bring them to programs, bring them to awareness events, immerse them in the mission, have them bring friends, personal tours, club meetings. Stewarding donors is communicating outcomes from their investments, giving them opportunities to help us, invite them to programs. It's all about the personal touch, right? So we have this menu of options. You talk to them, you get to know them. So what are they interested in? What do they like about what you're doing? How would they want to invest? And that's when you discover whether they're interested in an annual fund gift or a capital gift or a planned gift. And I mean, sometimes people will just call you and say, well, I left your planned gift and just wanted you to know. Okay, that's great. We'll invite them to a program. He's never been to a program. He came to a program a couple times now. He funds some of our summer docents, high school kids that come in. Just that moving them along and up the ladder. So this is our plan. It's pretty simple. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm telling you, this is a process, right? But the only thing I could think of is being that simple. New people, current people. Let's keep them on. Let's get them here and let's retain them, because it's so much harder to get a new person. It takes more time than retaining these people. And we have a pretty good retention rate in our facilities. So I don't know. I'll let you know in a year if this plan's going to work. But I think it's going to work. This is where the team stuff came from. So now they're going to start doing that. My favorite thing is our donors that bring busloads of people to the museum. I've had that happen 3 times in the last couple of years, and it's just marvelous. One was a Halloween party. I could dress the costume. This guy where he brought all the right people from all the expensive areas, and it was fabulous. And one of the guys that was there was got into my surgery, and he's talking about, I'm in 30 days ago today, a year ago, I'm sedated as they're starting to work on my eye, and they're talking about the Bishop Planetarium because he'd been there. So I thought, how are we even cultivating in the operating room?
True professional.
And he came because of a donor brought him to the museum. So it can happen anywhere, right? So here's my reality. This is, you know, everybody needs practice. Board and staff need practice, getting used to working with goals and objectives. I didn't learn that. I came from I mean, I was in geology for a long time, but then I went into the nonprofit world in Girl Scouts, and Girl Scouts is very corporate, very goal-oriented, very, you know, Peter Drucker really did all that work with them. So I got to the museum, and they didn't even know what a goal was. So if you aren't used to working with goals, people have to take time. You have to get people used to working with them. And you as staff have to drive that strategic plan. There's just no, the board won't drive it. They don't have time. They have their own businesses, they have their own lives, but you have to figure out how to engage enough time with them to be able to make it work, make it simple enough. Like on every agenda for governance committee, I usually put what the strategic plan goals that they put down as their goals are. How do you remind them? How do you help them? It's not, I don't want to browbeat anybody, just don't forget. You guys have said this. How can I help you do this? But we have to be the drivers. We live it, eat it, breathe it every day. They don't. Well, but they're paying us to do that, right? So we have to help them and learning how to be board members and help us ask people to get comfortable just to come to the museum. And you have to keep it simple. Revisions happen, you know, can happen all right. You know, make it rolling, make it a rolling plan, but my vote is strategic plan, and then build all your plans from there. You need strategy and everything. Yeah. Any questions? Laid it all out for you.
Here, back in your development plan, the current form of that, where do you tie that to annual metrics?
Well, that would be a work plan. So that'd be more of a work plan. This is more a philosophy. I haven't developed this any more than this. This is new. This is hot out of the gate here because we want to start on these teams. And the work plan, our rhythm is all involved in the planning that we did for our budget. And the strategic plan actually has some goals and tactics and timelines for that kind of stuff. And certainly the capital campaign does. We need money to be able to build it. So our work plans really have the driving piece on it. I'm just trying to get something simple enough for somebody to understand. This is our plan, is to connect people. And so they're trying to figure out, you know, how many times will they bring people. We have set metrics on this, and I didn't bring the metric slide, I'm sorry. But they wanted to maybe bring 2 or 3, each board member bring 2 or 3 people per month. And so they've set that themselves. And so, yes, it could be a lot more detailed. Yeah.
When you annually review your plan, if there's something in the environment that has drastically changed and you need to kind of recalibrate, do you take things off? Like, how do you end up in reality kind of managing that?
From the strategic plan? Well, I found out, and I should have brought, I have one back at my hotel room, but I took a long document of the strategic plan, and I put it on a spreadsheet. And I simplified it by goal and by quarter, and I've measured out, I've listed what we said we would do, and I've color-coded it as to what's been done, what's in progress, what has been delayed, and noted why. And I give this spreadsheet out at every board meeting and to the staff. So it's an easy picture way, it's the only way I can do it, of assessing. And so when they see enough red, well, it's probably, we were supposed to start building a year ago. Well, that's, you know, you're just going to change the date. So I think you have to change them. I think you amend plans. I don't think they're viable unless you really are, because life happens, right? Things change. You have to be able to change it. Your budget doesn't change. Usually your budget's your budget, and you just have to explain it. So if this project, like if you were depending upon funding from the state and the car, like happened this week, then you'd be, you know, your budget doesn't change, except that you know you don't have that revenue coming in. So you're not going to do that project. So that's how you go through that process of elimination. Anybody else have thoughts on how they would handle that in their planning? Why?
Well, a little bit related to that, but it used to be, this many years ago, the standard was like a 5-year long-range strategic plan. And I think yours is 3.
Ours is 5.
Is it 5?
16 to 20, through 20.
Is that, for both of you, that's still the standard?
I would not have chosen a 5-year plan.
Pardon?
I would not personally have chosen a 5-year plan.
What would you?
I would do it 3 years. Or make it rolling. But, you know, I just don't have enough staff time to be able to think enough in planning to redo the plan.
Yeah.
I mean, I think anything is viable. I think you need longer than a year.
Yeah.
And I think 5 is hard because a lot happens in 5 years, right? Your community changes, you change, you know, as an organization.
We definitely recommend to our clients 3 years.
Pardon?
We recommend 3 years. And yeah, I had always worked with 5-year plans and found that they really weren't tenable. And I think this rolling, you know, however you want to perceive of it, I think the idea of thinking about a strategic plan as rolling is smart because it gets people oriented. All that really means is you're doing what you should do with the plan, which means you're revisiting it on a regular basis. And, you know, her third bullet about try and revise and get the right plan for your organization. If there's one thing to take away as sort of a broad philosophical piece, I think that's it. I think that's really important. And the illustrations that Brenan's given about places where she shifted to fit what the organization needed, you know, that makes a lot of sense. And this notion about trying it and revising it, that's huge. You know, it's really important.
I think there are a couple of museums that are smaller museums that are probably listening in, and I've worked for smaller institutions. I wonder if you have any advice or guidance specifically geared towards institutions with 1 to 5 staff members. I've found personally that I think, you know, smaller institutions sometimes try and still have lots of goals. And I kind of wonder what the thought is on maybe having more of a focus on like one big goal that's kind of that you can celebrate and accomplish each year versus
For fundraising or for the whole
just
institution?
generally, yeah.
Well, you still, as a small institution, I probably have a board of directors, and you still have maybe a collection or education programs, and you got to raise money, and you have a facility, you know. So you still have components that all need a bit of attention. I'm not sure, maybe your focus is stronger on one goal than the other, but you still need to have try to get the strongest board you can, you know, and maybe it's division between the board. There's more board work in those small institutions than there is they're more of a working board than they are in a bigger board scenario. But I can't answer that directly. You know, maybe you've had that smallest shop.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I don't know, this isn't really like me, but again, I had to sort of retrofit my practices for what I had in my office. So in order to try to get to, I was trying to answer the question, are we as a team dedicating appropriate time to the goals that we have in the organization? And I actually, including myself, made everyone in 30-minute increments just load onto a chart that they kept on their desktop. What were you doing? And was it related to one of these 4 primary areas, which were goals? Is it fundraising? Is it training? Is it whatever it is? And then look at it and say, oh my gosh, we're spending 70% of our time not fundraising, and it's the primary objective that we're supposed to be dedicated to. We have to fix this. So I kind of did it backwards, because you can plan and say, okay, we must do this. I want to see what we were actually doing, and then see whether or not that fit with what the goals of the organization were. And they hated it. So did I. I'm not a bean counter by nature, but it was very instructive.
How about other institutions? You guys
Yeah.
I think that might be something that would be viable for like my organization. Brand new, and if you know where I'm at now, it's the San Juan Jugo House in Pompano, and it's only been open for a few years, and it's myself and one other part-time person. So we're starting at the beginning. But that might be, I mean, and you know what? We just had a strategic planning workshop on Saturday. So I have lots of questions and it went very interestingly. Anyway, I think that might be really hard to like pick like maybe 3 goals, like maybe not 7, but like maybe 3 like top priorities. Like it has to be financial stability, it has to be, you know, engagement. And so I kind of structured my mind when going into that session as like I want to get these 2 goals. I want sustainability and engagement to be like the 2 primary goals. And we might still actually structure it that way. And it's going to be a 2 to 3 year plan because as we are so small, we might change in 2 years, you know, and we might have to course correct depending on what takes priority or if we get funding for a new building that the city's thinking about helping us with and things like that. So,
And especially as a new organization, you might need to shorten that time frame.
right. So
Because
that's
a lot's going to be changing.
I think it's totally viable to have smaller, maybe more compact goals. Because I mean, we're so small, we just have to. Like, I don't want. My board members, they're like. I don't know what the analogy is here, but I don't want to frighten them away because they're totally grassroots at this point. And so if I throw these big giant numbers and 7 goals at them, I think they're all just gonna like run away.
Yeah.
Well, and you build them together.
Right.
They can help you build those 2 together.
Yeah.
That encompass a lot. Sustainability and engagement.
I mean, there's going to be
everything.
so much within those as it is.
Even understanding what that looks like for your organization will be hard because you guys are just starting out. You know, so what do those 2 things actually look like? And spending time on that will be important because then you can measure it. But be fair to yourselves. Like new organizations are always really ambitious, and that's great, and you need it. But make sure that you guys all have goals where you can celebrate success together. That's how you keep your board engaged. You know.
I think we do that on a statewide level with our board. You bring in, somebody was the Ritz this morning when we checked in and said, you have 30-something board members? I'm like, yeah. They're all over the state too, and they're all different side work. So you have to channel what they want to accomplish by what's really possible by the organization.
Yeah.
So we definitely, at FAM, you know, we structure it so that we've got things that we call in our parking lot. They're things that we'd love to do one day. We're just not there to do it yet. And those are all those great ideas that come out of our strategic planning meetings with the board that says, oh, we want to do this, we want to do this. Like, guys, you know, we have so many resources, so many staff, we can only do so much. Right. So we park those, but we come up with our priorities, and those are the core things we work on every year. And you know, and then we, like you said, even as old as we are, we still reevaluate and we'll say, well, this is done, this is ongoing forever, but this is something new we can focus towards. Maybe it's a grant, maybe it's a special project. Right. So I think it's really, I get what you're saying, Carmen, and I hear a lot of small organizations struggling because one of the things is trying to take all the input from your members and your board and make it into one compact plan and not be an octopus with 22,000 legs. You just can't, you're not going to do anything well. So
I think that's the thing is you end up spreading yourself really thin, and then when you have a major accomplishment, you may not celebrate it as you should. I think what you said about celebrating your accomplishments is really important.
Your volunteers, and especially your board, they need that so badly, and you'd be shocked at some of the things that are really small that you can just even talk with them about it. Pick up the phone and say, guess what, Molly, you know, we just did this. Oh, that's great. You know, that makes them want to come back. It's when it seems like that you can never climb that mountain. And it's good to be ambitious. You just have to make sure you got stuff that you can pick off to say, yes, we did this.
And maybe for the smaller institutions, my newfangled plan of 2 prongs, new and current, maybe that's work. Try it. Maybe it'll work. It is all about people. It's about your people essence.
Yeah.
And you got to get new and you got to retain them.
I think something you said at the very beginning about objectives and outside agendas really relates to that topic, because the smaller, newer an institution, the more likely it is that you haven't had a collaborative conversation about what are the actual objectives going forward. And so you have a number of people that might have slightly different versions of
Yeah.
what success means. And that can, because it's a smaller institution, it can have more of an impact on direction.
I think that's true. We spend a lot of time with our partners doing visioning exercises. That's actually the starting point of the strategic planning work. So we'll start talking to people and to ask them, what does success look like for you in this institution in 20 years? Let's start with the big picture and then kind of boil it back, but allow people to be excited about, their dreams and aspirations. It's really, it's great. And you get people who start to have a shared vision, and then that can drive your planning process.
And that's what I was referring to, that for our institution, that was very difficult to get people to think strategically.
Yeah.
Very difficult. And I think with practice, they can do it. You just got to keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next 5 years? Russell.
I think probably all of us are really good at identifying our internal needs. We need a new roof, we need a collections management policy. I also know when you talk to donors, it's not about what we need, it's how to communicate to what their interests are going to be. Have you found any good ways? I mean, I can sit there and say, if I don't have a new collection storage space, I have to stop collecting. That doesn't really get a donor excited.
Sorry.
So we're struggling with how to, sometimes we say, put the spin on why we need new classrooms or we need new collection storage space in a way that resonates with the donor. And it's not always easy. Maybe that's because we're too close. But I was just wondering if any of you had any great secrets in getting to that.
Brennan has all of the answers. No, I have some thoughts on it, but I would just start with the idea that I've really struggled with a lot of organizations and people within them on understanding and accepting the idea of donor-centered fundraising. But we need this. I understand. But the best salesperson in the world can't put it in your heart to want to donate to something just because I told you to. And so I think one of the things is trying to ensure that your structure, and this involves, your finance committee and everybody else, can accept as many unrestricted gifts as possible and that you're fungible. Because ultimately you're going to do so much better if you just connect with what that donor's really got in his or her heart than if they do write you $20,000 to get that thing done. Because that's the last one they're writing. The other one, you can go back to again and say, Larry, I really, really appreciate you. You're stepping up for this whatever. But let's talk about what you want to do. That's my thinking on it.
I think the museum immersion piece helps, that getting them back into collections. What does it take to maintain a collection? It's expensive, archival boxes, the staff time, the photograph cataloging, blah, blah, blah. All of that stuff takes time to care for it, just like we care for the manatees. It's just more compelling to have a live animal, that people want to adopt and care for, right? Than a mastodon that needs to be dusted and make sure he doesn't fall down, right? So maybe that immersion could work, I'll say that. But then the other piece is sometimes you don't have something for everybody. I have a great example. We adopted a voluntary pre-kindergarten class this year. The school district ran out of space. So we gave up our one classroom for a VPK class all year. We've had 4-year-olds. I had to build an outdoor learning space for them because we didn't have we don't have a playground. We had, pavers that kids could run on, and how many standees we might have had, right? And I went to donors that had never supported us before because I knew they would support that. And so it gave me an opportunity to bridge them into what we're doing as an institution with something that they believe in. And so now I'm hoping that they're going to fund part of our capital campaign because they funded that learning space. But I had to have a bridge. And the bridge was what I remembered that they were interested in. And maybe it's that. So maybe it's just listening to people. And maybe you can catalog it for another time and use it down the road. That's just a thought.
Do you have follow-up?
Yeah, I'm not speaking from the position of having the information that I want, but knowing what I'm lacking, I would like to have.
Yeah.
To me, I think there's value in looking broadly and strategically at your needs and capturing that information. I think that any capital or programmatic need can be described in a paragraph in the budget. And if we would take the time, like I take my own institution, we take the time with every department, describe the top 3 priorities for your department this year and give me a real budget with estimates on it. And if you have that catalog and you listen, like Renan says, then there are connections that can be made. I think I know that what we tend to do is say, okay, here are the priority needs, here are the capital needs, go find money for this. Well, give me a description. Security needs. Dear funder, we have security needs, send money, love Ruth. That's the extent of the information that I have to work with. So I would say that being able to be very cognizant of those high priority items with narrative descriptions that you can hand off to the grant writer with a budget would be really helpful. And like I said, I know it because we don't have it.
And see, I've got all that.
Oh.
That's the easy part. We can come up with those lists and the prices. It's really just trying to, I guess it's really making the case statement of why what we need is going to make a community a better community.
Yeah.
It's hard to sometimes.
Holding items in public trust. Yes, Maria.
I just wanted to touch on something because there's still that tension though that there's not a place, sometimes there's not a place for every donor. That being very careful not to create a program for a new donor. I mean, it just.
No chasing
I've been
grant
doing this
dollars.
for 15 or however long, 27 years on the nonprofit. And still, I go, wait, stop, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So, Ruth,
Because you get trustees who push gifts on you that aren't in the campaign, and now you have to find a way to steward it.
That's not, because it just is reallocated resources
Yeah.
away from something else. So it's just a real kind of a constant grounder and check on that you're not
And then you're the bad person because you don't want the redheaded stepchild $1 million.
Right.
I know, right?
So going back to that bigger picture, the case statement, Russ,
Yes.
for our institutions, is we all probably run with a gate and whether you have endowment or investments and then fundraising and grants and program fees and all that, right? So the pot is the pot. You need people to donate to the general pot. Getting to the words of how we are valued in the community is probably the most difficult task we have ever done as an organization. I came in, we were like, which head are they going to lop off? The planetarium, the manatee aquarium, or the museum? Which they're all too expensive. Well, not the main museum as much, but so instead of talking about what we do as an organization, and it took our branding exercise and really doing research for us to be able to really figure out how we could talk about ourselves. And so I think that case statement coming back to what do you do? Renan, I know where you are and what you are, but I don't know what you do. What do you do? How do you change lives in the community?
Right.
From the 4-year-old to the gray-haired senior citizen that comes for extra learning because they want to keep learning and keep vibrant. You got to figure out how to say those words. That's what donors should be donating to.
When we talk about and do work with partners on case statements and even sort of micro cases for different specific things, we really try to isolate 2 things: impact and emotion. What is it? Don't tell us what it is. Tell us what it's doing, right? For you, the donor, for us, the institution, for the community, that's important. And it really needs to be emotional.
So I didn't know if you wanted to address these that were some of the early questions.
Yeah, I think some of these came in during registration. I don't know if we have maybe 1 or 2.
Before we pivot to that, I think we had a question we didn't answer that we had deferred on plan giving and whether or not you talk about plan giving in the context of a major gift ask.
Menu of options.
I think I got an answer.
Okay, great. Because we would say, I think it's always good to talk about planned giving, but it's the last thing to talk about, because you can lose an outright gift that someone's going to structure if you go straight to planned giving, because, oh, that's great, so I can just, I've got a life insurance policy, so I don't even have to take anything out of my pocket. Like, oh, great, so now our organization won't see that for 20 years. I always try to look at that as sort of an end piece to talk about extending or a blended gift, something like that.
Well, in our case, what our planned gift was for this one donor was the first gift. It's not his gift first, but that was how we entered, and then we had to back and get him to come in and donate his offering. So,
So we might have time for maybe one or two of those.
do we want to talk about capital campaigns or
Was
feasibility?
there someone in this room?
Yeah, what do you all want to?
Yeah.
Did anyone in the room?
Mine was the last two.
Feasibility studies and the last two, yeah. Okay.
Feasibility study?
Feasibility study?
Carter Company has done ours. I've seen different ones. I'll let Turk talk about that. I will say, in looking at feasibility study for any kind of capital campaign, we would have been better off as a museum had we had a stronger major donor program to start. It would have been easier to start, and that's all I'll say. I think that's vital. So never stop. That's the deal.
Yeah, Brennan and I talked about that, and that's really true. Sometimes one thing that we find when we come in, so we do feasibility studies a lot. We call them planning studies because it's not just about the number, because we can't tell you what your organization can raise, but we can tell you what your key constituents, if you do the interview pool well, are telling us about what you can do, and they probably won't tell you. And so that objectivity is really helpful. Now, they don't always match up. I mean, we find very often people sort of underestimate what they're going to do in terms of supporting a campaign, but I've heard of examples where they haven't really come through. So, but here's one thing that the feasibility studies I think are really, really important for, which is if you've done a really good strategic planning process in your organization, that may be a reason why you won't need feasibility as much, because the feasibility study is a strong cultivation opportunity. You're telling someone that you're one of the few people the organization felt strongly enough to have their paid counsel speak to get their thoughts around your plan, the articulation of it, the viability of it from a financial position, and your involvement in that program. So it can be really helpful, but we've also done feasibility studies that we thought were very strong. The organization hadn't done a strategic planning study. They hadn't done any strategic planning work. They hadn't involved the larger community in the conversation. And for that reason, we recommended don't go forward with campaign. Make sure that you because these people were telling us, your key constituents are telling us, we don't feel involved. We don't know about this plan. Time to go back to the drawing board and do some more work. That cultivation piece is huge. You have people talking about building cultures of philanthropy. That means that people are informed, they're excited, they're engaged. If that doesn't exist, feasibility study probably won't help you so much.
And the other thing about feasibility study is life happens. And so you may do a feasibility study, a couple of years before you actually start your campaign, or even a year before, and then somebody dies.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody gets Alzheimer's, or life happens.
Yep.
And so the donors that you talked about, you thought were going to be there, may not be there.
Yep.
I remember attending some training. It was a major gift, and they said make sure that when you're meeting with the family, the husband or wife, or the husband, that he brings in the son or daughter, particularly if they're older, so that their son and daughter are in on the conversation. So when life happens, they know that's what mom and dad wanted.
I've seen it go both ways. And I would just say that in plan gifts, it's you have to have an instrument that may or may not be legally binding, but is at least a legal document. Most people aren't going to go fight someone's estate to try to get that gift. That's not very good for PR. But there is a shared mutual understanding. The only reason I say that is because we've had experiences where having the next generation in just created more noise in the conversation. They weren't as well connected to the organization. they were worried about their inheritance, quite frankly. So it can be dicey.
Did either one of you want to, I don't know, non-governmental grant sources? Is that something that you focused on or aware of? Or?
We've done a little bit of research, like for our capital expansion on, finding some education, but really, ultimately, it's your local foundations that are going to be your biggest supporters. And it's cultivating those program officers or leaders that are really going to help you. I don't know how you feel about it, Bruce. You have a lot more experience with that, but it's really our local foundations and not some national foundation that's really going to end up supporting our work. We will try as we have, something that matches stuff. But.
Yeah, and I would add to that sometimes we find partners who didn't even know about the connections that their own board members had on other boards. Like, that's really quick step one. It's just make sure you know what these people sit on, because then you've got a much greater likelihood of your time in grant writing being fruitful.
We've had a subscription to Foundation Search, which I like a lot. It's very expensive. And going into it, it took 2 years telling them, no, don't get it, primarily because I knew that we didn't have the capacity on the other side to cultivate those kids. I can write grants all day long, but if we don't have the connections and we don't have the information of the programs, you only need one to come in that you weren't expecting to pay for it, but you still have to be able to get that one and then the next one. And it's, they're great services, you can do incredible searches, but on the other side, you really have to be able to do the work.
It's still a relationship building for every grant that you write, every foundation, family, or regular or corporate. You still have to have the relationships. So you got to cultivate them.
And to that end, I think one thing that we see sometimes is that people will work really hard on that cultivation piece, right? They're thinking about getting that grant or thinking about closing that gift. The stewardship is just as important, and most often is the first thing to be left, right? Because it doesn't have to happen right now.
Well, I just want to thank you all. Thank you, Renee and Turk, for being here. I hope you all make it over to the mixer. We're going to continue to do workshops like this throughout the state.